Hi, folks. How are we doing tonight? Welcome. Thanks for coming to the American Writers Museum. My name is Kerry Cranston. I'm the president here, and we are excited about tonight's program. All good stories have this in common. They make you realize you aren't alone. When the founders of this museum set out to determine who should be included in it, they assembled lists of writers from all across the country, all genders, genres, ethnicities, and traditions to create a place where everyone could see themselves in literature and recognize their experiences and values. Tonight we welcome Glory Edim, whose anthology, Well-Read Black Girl, is a similar celebration of that recognition. What began as a book club then spiraled upward into an online community of thousands and a book festival, and is now this recently published volume. This book amplifies the voices of black women in all their power and skill. Glory has worked as a creative strategist for over 10 years at startups and cultural institutions, including Kickstarter and the New York Foundation for the Arts. She'll be interviewed tonight by Charlene Carruthers, whose book, Unapologetic, A Black, Queer, and Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements, has been called a rousing call for collective liberation. And she will be at Seminary Co-op on Wednesday night at 6 p.m. So if you want to see her there, go back and see her then. As the founding national director of BYP 100, she has worked alongside hundreds of young black activists to build a member-led organization of 18 to 35-year-olds dedicated to creating justice and freedom for all black people, and we welcome you both. Go ahead, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Let me tell y'all how excited I am to be here with Glory. I think I sent a text message based, will you be my friend, yes or no? Because Glory is this the embodiment of what it means to love black women and girls. And so I'm just super honored to be here with you and to celebrate you and to talk about this bomb book. It's amazing. And so we're gonna get right into it. And Glory's gonna gift us with reading an excerpt.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. And it is true. She sent me a text message and I said yes, followed by gifts of Oprah and Beyonce. It was very simple. I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. I'm really honored. I see some familiar faces, even some online faces, some hearts in here. So I'm going to begin by reading from the introduction. And it kind of just tells why I started this and how this all began. When I was a freshman at Howard University in Washington, D.C., I worked as a reading instructor at Maya Angelou Public Charter School. I was drawn to the school because of its namesake. I had already read Angelou's 1969 autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, twice by then. The first time was rather theatrically in the 7th grade. I recited the chapters aloud to my unassuming baby brother, Maurice. We both stumbled through the coming-of-age story and understood little of the childhood trauma she encountered. Yet I read it intently because I was intrigued by the relationship between Maya and her brother Bailey. At 12 years old, I was seeking myself in her story, looking for parallels in our childhoods. The second reading happened when I was much older. I was 19 and fully aware of Maya Angelou's legacy. I knew she had been San Francisco's first black female street conductor at the age of 16. I knew she had been close friends with James Baldwin and worked with Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She was iconic, a civil rights activist, dancer, actress, journalist, and of course, the world-renowned author. This time, Angelou's distinct voice was clear in my head, and her words resonated in a visceral way. As I read about her childhood in Stamps, Arkansas, my tears flowed endlessly. I cried for her pain and for her triumphs. The relentlessness of racism that plagued her childhood, the sexual abuse she suffered, the way literature helped her regain her voice when all seemed lost. After reading her memoir, something in my heart and mind clicked and forever changed me. I suddenly understood that her story was part of a larger story of Black womanhood and survival. She wrote openly about injustice, celebrated Black motherhood, criticized racism in the Jim Crow South, and fought for her own personal freedom. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is a powerful story of self-definition. Maya Angelou and the rest of the inspiring authors I've encountered throughout my life have taught me that, as Black women, we define ourselves for ourselves. When you tell us we can't, we simply resist and defy expectations. Our stories are filled with love, strength, and resilience. We are not looking for anyone else to give us validation because we have one another. We celebrate one another. We have a tenacity and grace that is unparalleled. In Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, she writes, "We had defended ourselves since memory against everything and everybody, considered all speech a code to be broken by us, and all gestures subject to careful analysis. We had become headstrong, devious, and arrogant. Nobody paid us any attention, so we paid very good attention to ourselves. Our limitations were not known to us, not then. We Black women writers have always had to take good care of ourselves, creating our own limitless boundaries. Whether we explore taboos, stereotypes, the idea of love, or the literary canon itself, we are writing ourselves into the spaces that neglect or ignore us. Headstrong, a necessary quality to withstand the losses and celebrate the victories. I created Well-Read Black Girl because I wanted to develop a creative space where Black women's voices could be centered. Storytelling is an extension of our sisterhood. From the beginning, I've dedicated WRBG to the Black women on our bookshelves. Yet it is also a call to action for Black women to freely define their own narratives on their own terms. Like Morrison states in Beloved, definitions belong to the definer, not the defined. I wanted to build on the radical notion that Black women can read, write, and be whatever and whomever they desire. Thank you.
So, Glory, you have built a phenomenal platform to, highlight the stories and skill, I think, and craft of so many Black women across this country with so many different stories. And you could have made a choice to write a book that didn't have other writers in it, right? You didn't have to write an anthology. So I'm not gonna ask you why you chose to write an anthology. What I'm gonna ask is, do you see yourself in these stories? Mm-hmm. How do you see yourself at all? And was it important for you to see yourself in the stories that are in this anthology?
Yes. I mean, that's a great question. I do see myself in every story, and I really see a reflection of myself in every author. Working on this anthology was just like a life-changing experience because it reminded me of how human people are. When you have to edit Jesmyn Ward or Jacqueline Woodson, and you see their mistakes, it's just, and they're not big ones by any means. They're they're beyond talented, but the fact that they are like us in a way where they have to put everything on the page and correct it and edit it, and it made me feel like a kinship with them because they trusted me to even see their words and their potential of the mistakes and how the work, how it gets made. I just imagine that, Jesmyn Ward did one draft of, Salvage the Bones, and it was perfect. And that's not how it works, there is a process, and there's a grace to even critiquing and loving each other in that way. Mm-hmm. And I could have, done this in a way where it was me as an individual, but I really felt that the only reason I have the success that I do is because of the community. And I feel like everything I'm doing should be community driven because it's publishing, it's a collaborative space. You don't have a book, it isn't successful without its the readers, and I consider myself a very dedicated reader. Even before I put the word writer or editor in front of that, I'm just I'm a reader. And that's something I feel like I have strong expertise in, and everything else is new and I'm growing into that. But I can't even imagine what the beauty of this without it celebrating and being in just in communion with these other writers, because that was the whole goal of Well-Read Black Girl, to celebrate and uplift the voices of writers. It's not glory, and I try to always say that, like, I'm excited and I am the cheerleader, but it's not just about me. It's like about everyone who wants to be a writer, who aspires, who's established. It's like really everyone who really dedicates themselves to like literature, especially when as a Black woman in this space where it's so limited at times.
That's right. That's right. And I actually want to talk about, like, as a writer, the structure of this book.
Yes.
Like, how did you arrive to, because I imagine that the book proposal looked very different from what this, like, ultimately resulted in. That's at least my assumption or my imagination. So could you tell us, for folks who have read it or haven't read it, about the structure and why you chose this particular structure and, like, how you broke down the sections?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm glad you asked that because originally this was I really envisioned a photo book. I wanted it to be very similar to the Instagram page where it had just like old vintage photos of these writers and quotes. I wanted it to feel very aspirational. But I really wanted the faces of the women. So I started doing the research, and I had a proposal, and it just really, things look different on Instagram when it comes to really finding the rights to all those photos and then trying to like have them. It's very expensive, to be quite frank, and it wasn't like landing the way I wanted it to as I was writing up the proposal and I was trying to do the research. Like I went to the Library of Congress and I went to the Schomburg. I was trying to figure out how to make it an actual like photo book. And when that wasn't, didn't go the way I planned, I went back and I asked a couple of my mentors. I talked to Tiara Jones and I talked to Renee Watson, both who are in the book. I told them about the idea and I was like, what else could I do? And I asked them if they'd be interested in possibly doing writing an essay. And I thought about the questions that I wanted to pose. I really wanted it to be something that the writers could really explore, like this idea of when you first saw yourself. That really is just the origin story, and that's my favorite question to ask. Like where did you start? And not just with this anthology, just in general, when I meet people, I'm like, what's your story? Like, because I think that opens up people to tell, it could be something that happened to them last week, or it could be like when I was 5 years old, So I wanted it to be a very open-ended question. And I thought about my experience, like when I first really fell in love with books in a way that it went beyond just like being leisurely and became more like therapeutic. And that moment with Maya Angelou was like a really defining moment in my life to hear to really understand her story. And it was like, for lack of a better, like an Oprah aha moment. It was really like, it was really like it was like my very like open moment for me. And so I was curious about like, how did that feel for someone like Barbara Smith or like Jacqueline Woodson, like how did it feel for other people? And I definitely like workshopped it a lot. I spoke to my friends, I posed the questions to my best friends, I talked to my mom about it, just to hear what the responses would be. And I shared with you too, like as we were talking, like I was afraid that everyone would say Toni Morrison, which is like excellent. This book could have been all Toni Morrison, like I love her. But I was like, will the essays become repetitive? Will they have like the same flow, and that didn't happen. Everyone came with like something like really completely fresh and new and unexpected.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna do exactly what you just did and ask, like, what is your story? Because I know this is not about you, your words, but it is about you. Because you made a choice on who to include, and I imagine who not to include in the book. You decided on the questions that would be asked for this. You did a couple of the Q&As in here. You wrote them out yourself. So who are you and who are your people?
Wow, that's such a good question. So my people, man, so I am first generation. Both my parents are Nigerian, and I was born here in the States, but I actually lived in Nigeria for 2 years. My dad, he studied here at Howard University, my alma mater as well, and the goal was he would come here, study architecture, and we would move back to Nigeria. So when my dad was like finishing college, my mom and I were back home, and I got really ill. So me getting sick changed the trajectory of everything. So my mom came back immediately and she stayed, and my parents eventually got divorced. My father moved back to Nigeria and me and my brother stayed here. So I spent summers in Nigeria. I traveled back and forth. We would go there for holidays to stay with my dad. A lot of times I would my dad was very much no TV, and where my dad lives is is very remote, so it was lots of books. So I just kind of pack them up when I would go for summer vacations and for holidays and stuff. It would just be lots of books. I remember reading Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider in Nigeria. Wow. So I just would carry. That's where my library and such started. So I am Nigerian American, so those are my people, my roots. But I grew up in DC. So let me clarify, Arlington, Virginia, a suburb right outside of DC. but my mom does live in DC proper now, but I grew up in Arlington, Virginia. And it's, Arlington is very multicultural neighborhood. It was, I felt very comfortable telling people I was Nigerian. There was also this kind of disconnect at times where I would tell folks where I was from, and they would say oh, well, I thought you were black. And I'm I am black. So there was this idea that my blackness didn't match up completely in some spaces. And it wasn't until I went to Howard where I really understood diaspora and this idea of being from the Caribbean, but being from Chicago and being from DC, it's all the same. It has this richness that we're all in this, in the same pot. You know what I mean? But prior to that, I felt I separated things a lot. I was, one way at home, and then when I was at school, it was another way. And it wasn't until my friends came over the house, they were what's that smell? What's that? If my mom was cooking fufu or making a goosey soup or something, they'd be what is going on? And as I got older, I became more comfortable with those distinctions. I became more proud of where my parents are from, the fact that I had the privilege to travel back and forth. And I can understand our native dialect, but I don't speak it, so that was also something that I struggled with, my cousins and even my younger brothers, they speak our native language, and I don't. They're just really fluent in languages. My brother also speaks Spanish and Japanese. I'm just the one I don't know what you guys are saying. So yeah, that's where I really. That's where I come from. That's Nigeria, and being from DC, being from this very multicultural space, this very metropolitan area where there's so many different types of folks that reside in Arlington and DC. And then I went to Howard because my dad went there. So I was very much a daddy's girl, and I wanted to go to the same school that he went to. And so I ended up at the Mecca at Howard University, which is I talk about it here. It was just a very defining moment for me.
How so?
Just because, again, I learned how to be my best self and really celebrate my blackness in a way that I didn't feel I had to compare myself to anyone else or feel there's any reservation in my identity. Whereas in other spaces, sometimes that would happen. Arlington, it is multicultural, but there's still times where everyone kind of still wants to be the same. And Howard just kind of pushed all that away. And then I graduated, and I was I'm back in the real world. And there's this idea that we have this almost this huge sorority of people isn't always going to exist. And with me trying to curate this community and create Well-Read Black Girl, it's a lot of times I feel I'm replicating the experience I had in college.
Oh. So tell us about the Well-Read Black Girl community, right?
Yes.
What's most exciting about it?
Yeah.
How did you get this? Did you know that it was gonna get this big?
No, not at all. I could have never predicted that I'd be sitting here talking to you, have an anthology. I wouldn't never, ever. I mean, I've had lots of different ideas, and no, I wouldn't. It just didn't happen that way. Also, I think some people may know the story, but it really started. I think of the story really. It's an extension of Black love too. So my partner he also went to Howard University with me, and we've known each other since our freshman year of college. And we were close friends, and then we started dating when our senior year. And he made me the shirt. He made me the shirt that said "Well-Read Black Girl," and that was a gift that he'd given to me for my birthday. And I didn't, really think of it. It was more like an inside joke between us. And when I was wearing it out in the public, and people were asking me questions, or just like, hey, they just wanted to know where'd you get the shirt from, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, my boyfriend made it, and then outside, when that was passed, it was like, so what are you reading? Like, what are you reading right now? And I typically, in New York, I always have like a book in my bag, and I would pull it out, and I would really have these like great conversations on the train with folks. Like, I am a talkative person naturally, but it just kept happening so many times that I felt like something was like really special about it. And it was a really vulnerable time for me too, because I was new to New York. I really didn't have any friends. So like a sister girl sitting next to me and being like, oh, what's up? Like, where's your shirt from? Where's your shoes from? Where's the book from? Like, it just was like really comforting.
Who does your hair?
Yeah, who does your hair? Like, yeah, just like conversation. And I was already yearning that. I was like, I need to be around Black women. My best friends don't live in New York. Like, I was already in a space where I was eager for that kind of connection. So the fact that folks were coming up to me voluntarily, starting conversation, and that doesn't happen often, especially like as you get older. Like, it's not like you just making friends randomly on the street. You know what I mean? So for that, it just felt really special. And so I went back and I sat with it for a little bit, and I talked to OPO, and I was like, well, what do you think I should do? Like, should I sell T-shirts, right? And he was like, no, like, what if you started a book club? And I was like, yeah, I think that'd be a fun idea. So I started it really small, thinking that it would just be me and my girlfriends, and just really small, not thinking like, oh, it would be this whole thing. But I do have a background in marketing and social media, and I thought it would be fun to create a social media thing. I was gonna be really happy if I had 100 followers. Like, seriously, I was like, okay, if I have 100 followers, that'd be really cool. And I didn't follow Bookstagram, and I don't even really, I'm sorry, I don't really even do Goodreads like that. You know what I mean? I do, I'm just, I was like, oh, this seems cool. It could be fun to do things.
I'm just looking at the count.
Oh, yeah.
It's 151,000. That's amazing.
It's really crazy. But, I mean, it's not even Kim Kardashian level, but it's still very significant. Yeah, so it just started happening. I kind of thought about what I do for my 9 to 5. I do a lot of social media and branding things, and I brought that energy towards it. And I really thought about, what if I was a little more intentional about the gatherings and how I host things. And my friends will tell you I'm the one to plan Christmas parties and do the white elephant. Hosting events comes very naturally to me. So it wasn't a big extension to have a book club, because I already do those things. But the real turning point from T-shirt to conversation to this was when I invited Naomi Jackson. So we did a test book club, and we read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, and that went really well. Actually, Men and Women came. I remember my friend Nisa was there. She brought her her boyfriend, who's now her husband. We just hung out. And then the next book I was reading was The Star Side of Bird Hill, and I went to see Naomi at Greenlight at the bookstore, and I had my Instagram. I showed her. I maybe had 60 people, and I was like, I have this book club. It's on Instagram. I was like, well, would you come? Talk to us. There'll be 10 people there, which there were 10, maybe 8, 10 people, and she said yes. And I think Naomi's now a very close friend, and I thank her so much for saying that yes, because I feel that's what shifted everything. So from that yes, I decided that it would focus on, because we read Ta-Nehisi Coates the first time. So decided we would focus on Black women, and we would focus on debut authors. Sometimes I don't know if everyone realizes that the book there's always a debut author. So it's the time you need support, you need people to buy your book, you need people to show up in the room to be we got you. We're excited for you to have the autograph. It's such a perfect time for a new author, because they need that additional support. So Naomi was a new author. It was her first book, and she was like, yeah, sure, I'll come. And fun fact, she's good friends with Natalie Diaz. She brought Natalie Diaz with her to the book club. Natalie Diaz is a Native American poet who just won the MacArthur Genius Award. which I was like, and I didn't know that at the time. And so she came, she brought her friend Natalie. We talked, she read to us. We did it in the back of a bar. And again, my like boyfriend, he's really wonderful. And he recorded it. He was like, I'll record it for you guys. So he did like the first 3, and then like you see no more videos because he was like, you're getting too big. but yeah, like so he was like, yeah, I'll record it for you. Again, it really reminded me of college because I was a journalism major, he was a film major, so he used to do my little like, welcome to WHBC. He used to do my videos for me. So he was like, yeah, I'll record it. And, it was this whole thing. So the energy was there. We had such a good time. And Naomi introduced me to our third book club pick, which was The Turner House, Angela Flournoy.
Love that book.
Yeah, Detroit, like Turner House. If you guys haven't read it, it's an excellent book. So again, it was like this domino effect of like, oh, who else do you want to meet? And then someone else was like, oh, you should read Britt Bennett. Britt? Oh yeah, she has this new book called The Mother's coming out. Email exchange. And then like publishers and publicists started getting wind of like what I was doing. Because I was even expecting that. Like I was like really excited to be in contact with the authors. And then like, so I think with Britt, they were like, oh, you should go through my publicist. And I was like, publicist? Like, I was like, I just want you to come to this thing. So then it started like taking a shape that it felt like more formal, and I had to like write a nicely worded email, and but all that to say, it just was really organic, and like it just kept like growing because of the introductions and just the energy behind it. And even, most recently I've been more vocal about like, hi, my name is Glory. But even before that, it took me like a really long time to go. Like I would just show like a picture of the book, and it would be really about the author. And it still is. It's like about the author, because that's the whole point.
But curators have so much power, right? Whoever curated this museum, like they're going to influence the thousands of people who move through this space. And I see you as a powerful curator. Right, of content. And I say all the time, and I even put it in my book, I was like, I don't feel as well read as most people that I know. I say that all the time. I know. Honestly, reading this, and it flipped the script, my internal script, because I'm very well read in fiction. Very, very well read in like various literature by Black women, Black folk, all kinds of like people who aren't necessarily like, I can't break down all of the things that Karl Marx wrote, right? But I can tell you like about, I don't know, Toni Morrison or Octavia Butler's or any Pearl Cleage's like entire catalog kind of thing. And so for me, like this gives me a lot of inspiration as someone who's always felt a way about my own well-readness in political spaces, right? But this book, to me, is inherently political. Like if you gather a bunch of Black women, because this is not well-read women of color girls or girls of color. It's not the well-read girls of color book. It is the well-read Black girl book. And so much of what I read in here, as a Black feminist, like it just deeply resonates with me. And I'm not one to believe that you have to like slap the Black feminist label on you for you to actually do Black feminist work. And so there are two like major themes that I pulled out of the book and want to go into. One is around protection, and specifically, whose essay? I have like dog ears in this book. It's in Barbara Smith's, triple OG Barbara Smith. Yeah,
which I like when she said yes. I was like, Miss Smith, are you sure you can't, Miss Smith? Like I was.
She don't be saying yes.
Yeah, she does not say yes a lot. So I was so grateful. Like literally, anytime someone said yes to me, I was like, thank you so much. Like it was just
the people you have in this book is just phenomenal. And Barbara Smith, when she began writing publicly about Black feminism, like as a Black lesbian, she talked about how dangerous it was for her at that time. And she says in the essay, for the first time, after reading Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin, she says, for the first time, there was no need to protect myself from the characters in the book. And so I'm curious, like, what books do you find solace in or safety, or do you feel like protected and like safe in reading?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also want to kind of go back to the word curator because I feel sensitive to that word because curation is, I feel like everyone uses that now with social media, but it's such a thing that it's like very studied and well researched. Like I know folks who have like their PhDs in creation. So so for me to do it on Instagram, I'm like, it is one thing. I think of myself as an enthusiast and an advocate, and I feel like I have good taste. So I don't like, I try to like stay away from the word curator. Okay. But in terms of like the things that I return to over and over, I really love short stories. And so I read a lot of Alice Walker. I love her short story collection In Love and Trouble. It's my favorite essays, everyday use. Because I love the feeling of short stories. I feel like parables where they kind of like give you a message. It feels concise. I love ZZ Packer. Drinking Coffee Elsewhere is like the truth. I feel like that's like still feels like a very relevant essay collection. You can pick it up now and has like that timelessness to it. What else do I read? I mean, as I was doing the research for this, I returned over and over again to Toni Cade Bambara, Gorilla My Love, a Black Woman, the anthology, like looking at and studying the craft of it. Yeah. Homegirls, Barbara Smith. Like I really looked at all these collections and see how they curated it and looked at the types of essays and poetry they decided to include. At one point, I was debating of putting some like sonnets in it, but then I felt like it was going in a little bit of a different direction. Maybe that's another project. But yeah, like, and I read things in different parts of my life too. Like, the things that I read when I was in high school or even college, they feel different. I know I look really young, but I am in my 30s. Coco.
So am I.
Yes, girl, we look good. And so, like, when I read things now, I'm just like, okay, like, how does this, it feels almost like a bookmark on my life to see, like, what I thought at, when I was Howard and when I read, because at this point, I've read The Bluest Eye maybe like 6 times.
Oh, yeah.
Or I've tried, like, and now I'm like reading in a different way. So because I'm writing more, I'm looking more at structure. I'm looking at the craft of the story. What happens in the first 10 pages? Like, how does it get to its like essence? That's right. Whereas before, I think I just was like reading in a very emotional way. People often ask me like how I do the book selections, and it really is like if it makes me laugh or if it makes me cry. If a book like has me like feeling tight in my chest, like I know it's a good book. If I feel that suspense or I feel just emotionally drawn to it. I also feel like I pull a lot of inspiration from other genres. I go to the theater a lot. Like I watch a lot of plays. Lynn Nottage is in this book because of that reason. I've always been obsessed with her, and like from Ruin to Sweat. I think she's doing a whole series at Signature this year that I'm like super excited to see. And I also worked a little in theater right after college. So I try to look for like intersections across genres just to get inspiration from. And I think the page serves as a guide, whether it's a book or a play or even music. Like it just is how the story flows. I'm trying to think what else. Nikki Giovanni. Yeah.
Is there anything or anyone that we will be surprised that you read them or this book is something that, like that's your jam?
Well, I think like I actually read a lot of plays too. Like I really love Susie Laurie Parks. Even in the examples that I gave with the short stories with Alice Walker and ZZ Packer, I think I'm really drawn to dialogue. Like I like how I like when I'm reading a book and it feels like, oh, you know what? Someone would say that in real life. Some like stories sometimes can feel like really lyrical, but I love like when it's just like good character dialogue when people are talking back and forth and there's like a rhythm to it. And I also really love like nonlinear stories, like White Teeth, Zadie Smith. I love how the format of that story. maybe this might be unexpected, but I love Catch 22. That's like one of my favorite books. Barbara Kingsolver, like I love Poisonwood Bible, and those kind of always like follow the same like non-linear stories with this flashback and mirror memories. It kind of goes all over the place, and then at the end there's like a full like resolution. Yeah, and it, now that I say that out loud, it's just like it's probably how my that's how my brain is. I'm just kind of like, and then the end, you know, like I kind of like jump around different places, and then all of a sudden somehow everything comes together at the end.
There's a resolution.
Yeah, there's a resolution at the end. Yeah.
So I have another section in here that I want to ask you about, but I'm going to ask an impossible question. I'm going to say it's an impossible question to answer. But I'm asking it because I imagine that there are aspiring writers in the room. Like there's somebody in here who has an idea and you haven't written it yet, and hopefully by the end of this evening you're gonna do it. There's some typewriters over here if you need to get started, you know. What makes good writing?
Oh, well, that is a difficult question. Okay, so again, through this process of writing this, and watching the people that I consider masters, how they do their work, like no one is above edits, and I think it's less about the quality per se of the writing, but just like how intensely you are open to critique and changing and like being able to like develop your voice. I was really just amazed at the generosity between all the contributors who are clearly established in their craft, that they like really extended themselves and took my advice and took like my edits, so like, and something about that just like felt like really humbling. Like they're like really involved in this exchange and taking the tips and the line edits that I'm doing very like gently because I'm like nervous. I had a lot of anxiety going through it, but then I had to basically buckle down and say like, this is my book. This is, I am the editor. I have to be really like, I have to be steadfast with this and not like waver and not be too overly nervous. Because even in this situation here, this is a really exciting, but I am nervous because it all just feels new to me. And I'm used to kind of like being behind the scenes with things. Yeah, I think like good writing really has like a rhythm to it, and the things that I enjoy have a level of like vulnerability, where you can tell the person is really like putting themselves on the page and they're sharing like intimate details. I've read a couple of like right now I've been thinking about writing a particular moment in my life that is really hard for me. And the best advice I got was like, write the thing that you're like most afraid of.
Yeah.
Like really write. Did you tell me that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm having flashbacks in this moment of my own.
I was like, you might have said that. Okay, but yeah, like really write the thing that you're most afraid of and put it there and like sit with it.
Yeah.
And I say that a lot because we're in a space where, especially with social media and like living in New York, there always feels like a sense of urgency. Like if I can like sit with the discomfort of what I've written and process it, then I know it will be good. Because if I'm feeling this discomfort, this means like that emotion will be transferred to the reader, I'm hoping. And so as I'm like start trying to really like unpack this difficult moment in my life and write about it, I'm like, I have to be like unafraid of that feeling and that discomfort. So I think that's where like good writing, and that's why my litmus test for me is good, is still like my emotional response. Because it's like, oh, like I felt it. I really, really felt it. I've always been that way. Like even when I was little, like if I would have an outburst, it was because like I'm like, but Boy Meets World, he fell, and like I would just have these like feelings where I would just like I would really feel it like in a visceral way, and I also think it keeps me honest, and it also like keeps me like, I know I'm being intuitive, and not just kind of like being performative or saying things. It's like oh, I really feel this.
That's right. That's right. If y'all get a chance, they're right around the corner. There's a quote from Octavia Butler and James Baldwin around like the writing process, and like Octavia just shuts it down and says, "You think you good at the beginning, and you probably not." but you have to do it over and
Yeah.
over and over and over again, and that's how you become good.
Right.
And so I'm excited to see what you do next, because
Lord.
I do believe that great writers, people who write well, read
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah.
Read a lot. And so my last question before we open it up to everyone else is around the theme of invisibility that I think is present and discussed throughout the book. And there is an essay or a piece in here by Mahogany L. Brown.
Yes, I love Mahogany.
And I don't know Mahogany, but I imagine Mahogany's voice when I read this. And now I need to actually look it up.
Oh, she has a wonderful voice. She's
Really?
like an amazing poet. Yeah.
Gosh, I just read it in someone's voice. And in it, she writes, in Sacramento, California, I was invisible everywhere I went. Brown skin, gap-toothed smile, unpetite, nappy hair, not funny or smart or enough of any one thing to fuss about. And so I found books.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear you talk about what this book makes visible. Right? What's, particularly around what's been rendered invisible,
Right.
and how this book makes things visible.
Well, what I'm so excited about is this book really affirms that we do need reflections of ourselves, and they're not simply just platitudes that we say that we need more diversity. We need these things in schools. We need to have representation. We really do need to do it because it heals us and it allows us to see ourselves wholly. I was surrounded by a lot of different people as a young person, but I still did not realize what I was missing because it wasn't provided for me. I was talking to students earlier today, and I asked if anyone had read Gloria Naylor. No one raised their hand. But everyone's read To Kill a Mockingbird. And, you know what I mean? So these simple things where there's no question that these stories are important and that they have craftsmanship and they need to be read and told and really cherished, but they're not even being put in front of us. And when it's invisible on the bookshelf, you can't see yourself, and you can't even realize that that's something you could aspire to or feel accepted, and because of that, I was reading things that I loved. I loved Little Women, and I loved Wuthering Heights. I read all these things, but the moment I read Maya Angelou, it's that's when that shift happened, because I was oh, this is me, and not necessarily in a literal way, but it was something that I was this person reading, because I kind of do the similar thing. I read aloud a lot, and as I was reading her aloud, I was this sounds like my mom. And then later on, when I was older, I don't go into this in the in this story, but my mom suffered from a severe depression, and from about the time I was 19 to the time I was about 22, she was selectively mute. So she literally didn't speak, and so with Maya Angelou, I felt that same kinship, because that something happened to her very young too. When she was 5, she experienced a trauma and she stopped speaking. And so Maya Angelou, my mother, didn't speak for the same amount of years, right? 5 years. And as when that happened, we had a process of communicating where we would write letters to one another, and she was she needed treatment. And if my mother walked into the room now, you would never know this happened. She's healed and in such a beautiful place, and our family has really overcome that. But at that time, I wasn't going to books just because it was something to do or even to see a reflection. I needed that. I needed the support, and I was looking for advice in terms of becoming a young woman, trying to understand my mother's pain and her grief. I was trying to put words into my life in a way so I could feel just feel a sense of that, back to that word, resolution and calmness, So it's not just about oh, we need diversity. Sometimes people really need healing. They need that. You need someone to tell you. When I read Bell Hooks and she tells me about what solidarity means or what it means to be a Black feminist, that's a real thing that I'm applying to my practical life. It's not just something I'm putting this on Instagram, So I like write down these things and I read these quotes and I read these books to really try to find ways to apply them in my like personal life. And I feel like the women that I encounter, and I'm sure a lot of women in this room do the same things. I feel like I know you do the same thing. Like you are reading these things to better yourself and to be like a stronger, viable, more present person in the world. Maybe it's because I'm a Capricorn too. I don't know. like I'm just like I do try to like take everything I'm reading and apply it and be really just be generous with that too, because I feel like a lot of the work that I'm doing now, like I feel like I'm a resource. So I didn't get an MFA, I didn't necessarily study publishing in school, but now that I have access to it, and I'm just really trying to like pay it forward and like help people with the resources I do have.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we please give Glory a round of applause? Awesome. Yes. So good. So good. So let's open it up to questions. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Could you tell us about your book club?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the book club, it happens once a month in Brooklyn, and we have, if you're in Brooklyn, you can come in person. If not, we have two ways for you to participate. We do a Twitter chat where we like chat with the author. We did one with you, right? Yeah, so we did a Twitter chat with you, and then you came to the book club in person as well. With New York, a lot of people come through on their tour, so it's like pretty easy to coordinate and have people there. Another thing that we've been trying to do, but we haven't had as much success, is like the live streams. What I've found is people get more shy or like more aware of the camera, and we kind of lose some of the intimacy. Like in the group, it's a very egalitarian space. Like we sit in a circle, we have food. We try to make it very like, almost like creative church is what I like to think about of it. It's a very like welcoming space. So the times I'm trying to do the video, it kind of like interrupts that. So I'm trying to find ways to still keep people engaged and virtually aware. But right now the primary like meetings happen in Brooklyn, and then there's also the Instagram feed, which really serves as more of a discovery tool. So people will, post a book they're reading, or if they've written a book, they'll post using the hashtag to get people to see it and to like engage. And so a lot of conversations happen on Twitter and Instagram around just like, this is what I'm reading, this is what I'm excited about.
So, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
I was curious on how your reading patterns may have changed with time. So thinking about how a lot of books that are coming out as maybe authors are less like grounded in Black pain or more about like Black joy. It's like the whole idea of like Black girl magic and Black joy in general has become more trendy and more discussed. So I'm just kind of curious about like how you change your reading style based off of like moods and like knowing that the reading book may affect what you're reading.
Yeah, so I've made a point of being, because what I like to read, I tend to be like do the same things over. So I really like reach out to the book club and take a lot of suggestions now. So we've gone through like reading a nonfiction book. We've done like poetry. We're going to be doing, for the first time, we're doing a romance novel. I'm reading The Proposal by Jasmine Gilroy. Is that how you say her last name? Gilroy? Yeah. I'll double check that. But so I get a lot of recommendations. Science fiction, I love magical realism. So I try to do like recommendations from the group. And now that I have like a lot of connections with publicists and publishers, I get galleys and arcs. And so I kind of go through those and make my like tally of things. But I still just kind of like the things I like, So right now, with the election year, I was very mindful about picking selections that would be very politically inspired, hence why we read Unapologetic. That was our September book. And then our October book was Training School for Negro Girls. The reason I picked that, I think most people might know this, but when I read that title, I immediately thought of Nanny Barrows. And so I knew that she was going to have the stories, even though it's a short story collection, it was fiction, I knew it was going to have political leanings simply because of that title. So I maybe read like 4 stories, and I was like, oh yeah, we're going to read this. And so, yeah, so if you notice, probably out of like the 12 books we read a year, there's still like 4 that are short stories. I do a lot of history as well. I love like contemporary history. But I try to take a lot of suggestions from the group and get a feel so it doesn't feel like I'm doing everything that like I like. So I just, we just vote and you know, I read things in advance.
Next question. Anyone else? You have another? Don't be shy.
No, it's
Don't be
okay.
shy.
What is your writing process?
Oh yeah. Most recently, I went to New Orleans for like 3 weeks, and I kind of like locked myself in a house in order to like finish a couple of projects that I'm working on. But because I am a new writer, and again, I studied journalism, but creative writing I feel like is a different practice, and I need to be like locked away and secluded, and I like to get out like a messy draft. So when I was on this trip, I would write 4 hours in the morning and then write 4 hours at night. And I would just like literally write whatever came to my mind. Like I really just like put everything out. And then I go back and clean it up and like add the telling details and make it more lyrical. But like I just like literally like vomit words out. And I'm also very mindful of word count. So I use like some apps to like, it just makes me feel better to like see like the numbers going up. And then I kind of go back, and I have like a very close friend where she's like my reader, and we go back and forth. So I recommend having like someone you really trust and that can like offer you criticism and just help you just like shape your narrative. But yeah, during that 3-week period, I got like 50,000 words done, which I was like very excited about. But then like on a daily basis, I probably like write for like 2 hours a day. Like I get up really early and I write in the morning, or if it's been like a really busy day, I'll just like try to do it right before I go to bed. But like it's not even necessarily like sitting on my laptop. Sometimes it's just journaling. But I feel like I'm constantly like always writing in my head or thinking about something. It's just kind of like giving it shape when it hits like the page or the computer or laptop.
Yes, we'll go to you, Elena.
Have you ever kind of encountered any challenges as to what the well-read black girl looks like? I know as black women, often people kind of have this box that they put us in. It's like either we're this or we're that. And so in thinking about the beautiful way that this book is laid out, all the different authors, all their different stories, they come from so many different backgrounds. And so I just wondered if you ever like had any questions about, well, what exactly does a well-read black girl look like?
Yeah, I like to say it's open to interpretation, but I did have something happen recently where I posted something on my Instagram that received some just like really negative feedback, and that hadn't happened before. And so I had to be really clear about my politics and say like, this behavior is unacceptable because I feel like it's disrespectful, and like, you know, you don't have to be here. And that was like really difficult to do to another black woman. I felt like uncomfortable, but they were being disrespectful. Like they weren't like, I have like a code of conduct that I have in my mind, and I also have like a community guidelines that like we share on the site, because it's okay for us to disagree and be in discourse, but like the ones that like reaches points where it's like violent or vulgar, like I feel like that's unacceptable. But in terms of just like that title, I really think it's open to interpretation. This idea of being well-read is, I feel like sometimes it can sound elitist. And I think if anyone who picks up a book and enjoys it and like, gets gratification and can share and have a constructive conversation is well-read, right? So whether you're reading this book or Bell Hooks or Sister Soldier, I've read everything, like everything. So I don't want it to be about this idea, like you have to read this book to be part of this. You know, I don't want there to be any kind of barriers. This is all about accessibility and having a discussion that is eye-opening and like enriching and learning something new. And at times the book clubs can become like emotional spaces, but I do encourage people to like really bring it back to the craft of the book and try to center their examples or what they're feeling on the page. So this made me feel this way because, or this incited this, like just to have, so there's structure and everyone can like follow along. But, you know, I don't think there's one way to be a well-read black girl, and that's why it's like really important for everyone to be in the room and have the conversations and have like multiple voices.
Thank you.
So are you writing fiction or nonfiction right now?
I'm doing nonfiction. Yeah.
Yes.
So my friend and I, we actually run a book club here in Chicago.
Oh, awesome.
Collective Instagram, like I run the Instagram and I love your page.
Yay.
And so I was wondering like what advice or encouragement you have for us to keep going. So we're about like a year and a half years old.
Yeah.
And so like we're trying to, I don't know, figure out branding, what our book club should look like, but also like, having that momentum of people like to keep coming, be interactive. But then also, we have work, my friend, he's married.
Oh, wow.
So many things. So it's just like advice to just like keep going and have that motivation to like be.
Yeah, I think it's like, for me, the end goal was really just, originally it was to make friends. So I think you have to like decide like what your end goal is, and if you are looking to like host more events or have grow like a larger presence. I have found publishers are really eager to work with people. So if there are like certain publishers you want to follow, reach out to them, let them know whether they're based here in Chicago or in New York. Like request galleys, tag the publisher in the photos, hold contests, find a space, whether it's like a local bookstore or like a cultural space where you can gather. People are always looking for spaces where you can come together, but also like promote the book. That's like, there's also the economics behind it. Another reason why this is successful is because publishers are trying to sell books. So you are a resource, and you should like definitely have them send you things and request that. And then I also say, get your like family and friends involved as much as possible. The motivation really, it shouldn't be something that's difficult or challenging for you. Like you always want this to be a fun thing. If it starts to feel like not fun, then maybe like, that's not like, you shouldn't do it if it's like stressing you out. But so as long as it's something that you feel like you're growing, and then we can connect too. What's your name of your club?
Black Literature Collective.
Okay, I'll follow you. We'll tag him.
Did y'all get that? Black Literature Collective, right here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we can take one more question. Yes.
Well, it's just a comment. I have a general appreciation that I would like to talk about for what you've done.
Oh.
I spent a lot of time online. I did earn an MFA. And I do a lot of writing, but I do more editing, for money.
Yeah.
So just getting really frustrated with, so much that you see going on in the digital space and people's preoccupation with just being online.
Right.
And I'm a person who raises daughters and try to preach the importance of reading books to all people that I encounter. And there was just a point where I was looking for stuff to read because I felt like I had been online for 5 years and not really reading books enough. And so that's what really drew me to you and to what you were doing. And so I love that in the book there's also book recommendations because we need that. We need to know who the new voices are and who the old voices are that we should revisit, because there are people that I read, I'm 40, in my 20s that I don't remember all of it, but Gloria Naylor and Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde, and those were part of my formation, So I just really respect and appreciate what you've done.
Thank you.
So thank you
so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. I thought so much about myself as a young person, and I think of this as, part of my legacy in so many ways. Like I wanted to live on a library bookshelf. I wanted it to be like a keepsake for people, just to remember all these different voices. And I feel really proud of the collection. And I feel like all the essays do feel like conversations. I didn't want it to feel overly academic or rigid. I really wanted it to have a flow. And even we were talking about how I was curious about how people read it. You said you skipped around. Some people go from back and forth. Some people go to the recommendations immediately. Like all these experiences feel very reminiscent of the book club, and I really wish I could have the capacity to take it to, every city and have more gatherings. And hopefully, in the future that will happen. But there is a special intimacy that happens where we're close to one another. We become friends. A lot of women are writers themselves, and we have spaces where folks are going off and making their own writing groups. They travel together. And it's really special. And I don't think that I'm like the only person to create this, right? Like, that's why I'm so excited to hear that you have your book club, and I hope there's other women in here. Just like everyone should be creating these things, and they can have all the different names or what. Like, it's just all about sharing the word and respecting it and being just kind to one another. I think that's like the goal of all of this that we're doing.
Awesome. So, Glory, where can we find you online?
Okay. Oh, well-read Black girl.
Uh-huh.
And on Instagram and on Twitter. But on Twitter, it's like BLK because of word count. And I'm doing my festival this weekend. I'm actually going back. I'm traveling to LA this week, and I'm doing some stuff in Philadelphia. And then I'm going back to New York for our second annual festival. And that's something I'm hoping to continue to grow every year, have it be even bigger. So you guys are all invited next year if you can't make it out on Saturday. And yeah, I'm also just Glory it's Guide to Glow. My nickname is Glow, so it's just GLO.
Don't say it like that.
I know. I'm like,
Guide to Glow.
Guide to Glow. I'm like, do you want to follow me, my regular person one?
Okay. So there are books here, and we need to sell out. Like, that's actually what we're here for. In addition to listening to Glory, get yourself a book. Get a young person, older person, in between person a book. We all need to read this book. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. I love you. All right.